Alright guys, if you had not already heard the news, Monster Hunter Wilds has just become Capcom's fastest selling game of all time. Now that is pretty astounding because they have a massive amount of games that they have released over the years, but this one for some reason has decided to be their fastest selling of all time, which of course doesn't mean that it's gonna, slow down anytime soon. It very well could be their best selling title of all time in the future. We'll have to wait and see how that pans out. But the game has already sold 8 million copies in the first 3 days that it was available. Crazy numbers. Numbers that some titles will never see, numbers that a lot of studios and developers would kill for to be able to say our game sold X number of copies. So again, the game is doing exceptionally well. Minor controversies aside, and I say minor controversies because again, we've had this discussion about how some people think the game's woke, some people don't. I'm not even going to delve into that in this video. It's just not even worth talking about at this point right now. However, the things that are worth talking about, of course, since launch have been optimization issues, which unfortunately it doesn't seem like those have been fixed. It doesn't seem like those are going to go away anytime soon. The game is getting new patches, but unfortunately they're not addressing optimization. That is just something that's going to be a thing. And as long as you are a computer player, a PC player like I am, you're always going to have to research the required recommended specs for these games because it's just the nature of gaming on PC. Now, again, unlike what some people think, it's not like, okay, I built my PC and I have to worry about swapping everything out in 2 years. My computer's had a lot of life out of it in 5 years, with only minimal changes here and there. That being said, you do have to recognize that not every rig is going to run every game equally, so that's just a reality of life. But of course, we've had discussions about whether or not Monster Hunter Wilds feels too easy, which is so funny because a lot of times from the gaming media, the gaming press, you'll hear, oh no, it's too hard, we need an easy mode, and that's just been kind of a staple from games media for the past 10 years or so. These games journalists are not gamers first and journalists second, it's the other way around. So you give them a video game to have to review or to test, and they're like, well, why is it so hard? Why not make it easier for my smooth brain, It's just the unfortunate side of the way that the rhetoric online tends to go. That being said, even games journalists are saying the game feels easy after playing games again like Dark Souls and Elden Ring and a lot of other titles. So that's the thing. It feels like for some people, I guess, a departure from Monster Hunter World and the previous titles. Now, of course, a lot of people are complaining about not being able to see the health bars. I don't understand this because I guess there is a heart rate meter. So as the enemy is getting weaker, the heart rate slows down. From what I've seen people playing, it seems like that works fairly well. But again, this is something you can mod into the game if you really want to have it. Again, I'm not against modding games. So all these things being said, all these things aside, the game has still crushed the numbers of any other game that's come out in the last few years. And to be honest, this will be one of the biggest titles probably of this decade. Of course, Black Myth Wukong did exceptionally well as well, but this game here, I believe, has already passed the peak that Black Myth Wukong hit. That being said, if you go back to looking at Monster Hunter World, the peak that they had 6.5 years ago was only 334,000. And God, I mean, hell, Monster Hunter Wilds got 1 million more than that, so pretty insane numbers. But what's crazy about it is if you look at the reviews, Monster Hunter Wilds, despite the heavy player numbers, still sits at 55.62% on Steam, whereas Monster Hunter World is sitting at 87%. Now, the reason that this is important is because a lot of the criticisms I've seen online, and from people that I've talked to personally, is that this title, Monster Hunter Wilds, does not live up to what Monster Hunter World had to offer. People feel like it was a departure from the previous titles. Something that we're hearing now about Killing Floor 3, after the beta revealed that the identity of the game had been sacrificed for mainstream appeal, which is unfortunately something that we've seen time and time again. And this is an article from Bounding Into Comics. It says, players unhappy after Killing Floor 3 beta reveals franchise identity sacrificed for mainstream appeal. The most disappointing thing I've ever had the displeasure of being excited for. Now, again, this is a common trend in AAA gaming when unfortunately you have a storied title, a long-running franchise, and people are anticipating the sequel, the trilogy, the next game in the series to come out, and it just isn't what they were expecting. A lot of us, Halo fans, we went from Halo 1, 2, and 3 to, again, these subsequent games like Halo 4, 5, and Infinite, and they are just not as good. And it's unfortunate when these things happen because it's a massive kick in the nuts to gamers who are just looking forward to fantastic titles to play. So the article says, following the end of its closed beta test, Killing Floor 3 is now making its final preparations for its official release later this month, but unfortunately for developer Tripwire Interactive, it seems the long-awaited sequel may not hit the mark with the franchise fanbase. The trouble for Tripwire Interactive kicked off last October when the developer announced that in the third entry, the series' standard buy weapons as you go gameplay would be replaced with a specialist system akin to those seen in Overwatch or Marvel Rivals, which again, I don't think is a bad thing necessarily if the way that the game is already established is to have specialists, but switching it up, for a trilogy, that just seems really strange. Despite the initial reactions to the game being positive, the news that characters would be tied to specific classes left fans dispirited, and as a result, the outlook towards and conversations surrounding the game began to grow increasingly negative. And again, negative press can massively affect the release of a game, or at least a negative outlook online, discourse around the game. Look no further than Concord. While Concord had plenty of other issues, obviously the negative discourse played a factor in that. By the time Killing Floor 3's closed beta was held on February 20th to the 24th, players were extremely hesitant about just what to expect from the upcoming title. And unfortunately, this early preview not only failed to quell fan fears, but actually raised a whole host of new ones. From its questionable gameplay mechanics to its bland art style, generically dull UI, poor optimization, that's going to be a problem, nerf-like gunplay, overly complicated hub lobby system, removal of characters and announcers' endearing quips, absence of fan-favorite tracks from bands like Demon Hunter, Living Sacrifice, Fit for a King, and Impending Doom, and worst of all, a heavy focus on battle pass and premium currency monetization schemes. Oh boy. The beta left players feeling even more uncertain towards the game than ever before. Providing a brief rundown of their criticisms, Twitter user 006MLG wrote, awful voice acting, movement feels like Apex, animations are janky, gunplay feels weak, UI is awful, healing is no longer unlimited, people will and can be revived off the ground like Call of Duty, Zeds don't feel like Zeds anymore, characters are annoying, loadouts suck. Another person said, I'm incredibly beyond pissed that whoever in effing charge of Killing Floor 3 thinks that the operators are a good idea. You're just killing the personality of the game franchise for F's sake. Another person wrote, Killing Floor 3's art design is abysmal. Every single Zed looks atrocious, and it pains me to say that because Killing Floor 2's Zeds were masterpieces as well as their event designs. How do we go from awesome spider-human hybrids to mouths with legs and shit animations for crawlers? Well, I'll tell you how you get there. The article, luckily, actually kind of covers what I was thinking when I first started reading it. Likewise, over on YouTube, a quick glance provides even more evidence that very few fans are optimistic about the soon-to-be-released Zed Slaying Simulator, with many creators uploading videos with such titles as The Killing Floor 3 beta was awful, and Killing Floor 3 feels kind of off what happened. While a graceful take on these videos suggests that their respective creators were genuinely let down by their first and probably last taste of Killing Floor 3, even if their titles are exaggerated clickbait, the collective view count of these videos shows that the internet at large is growing ever more aware of the game's issues. Admittedly, criticisms as vague as something feels off can typically be written off as giving players on opposition to any amount of change, good or bad, being made to a given franchise, and we've seen that before in games where it's like, okay, you made a change for the better, but people are going to complain about it because it doesn't feel the same, and that does happen from time to time. Now, here's what I wanted to get to, because this is a far more interesting piece of this topic in my personal opinion. In taking a broader look at the situation within the context of the video game industry's current state, Killing Floor 3 seems on track to release as yet another game that betrays both its core fanbase and original identity in an attempt to appeal to a wider audience. Oftentimes, such a change in identity is the result of the development studio going through significant leadership or personnel changes. In the case of Tripwire Interactive, one wonders just how much of Killing Floor 3's drastic change-up results from the 2021 exit of co-founder and CEO John Gibson, who stepped down following a 17-year tenure after being denounced by the studio's fans and employees for tweeting in support of the Supreme Court's decision to uphold the Texas Heartbeat Act, which prohibits women from receiving abortions once an embryo or fetus begins producing a heartbeat. So again, if some of you don't remember, John Gibson, back during the later time when we still had to deal with COVID and all the craziness and the BLM protests and everything else, people were not as willing to speak out on Twitter, to be as outspoken. This was prior to the Gamergate 2 kicking off and the anti-woke movement kind of like, steamrolling ahead, And people like John Gibson, had he come out and said this 3 years later, would not have been canceled the way he was. But when he said this in 2021, Elon Musk hadn't bought Twitter. People were still afraid to speak their minds online. And he got railroaded by the gaming media, by people online, people brigaded. They basically all were calling for his head, and he had to step down as CEO of Tripwire Interactive despite being the CEO there for 17 years. And subsequently now you're looking at a game that apparently doesn't have any of the heart and the character and the passion, if you will, that it had while he was the CEO. So very, very interesting that you can kind of like tie all these things together, that when all the talent, all the creatives, all the people that are at these studios step down, move on, resign, go to start their own studios, the people that are replacing them are just not of the same caliber. They don't have the same ideas. They don't have the same, level of experience, and they don't seem to know what customers want, because this inevitably happens time and time again, where a game takes a departure from its previous path because of changes at the studio, and it will massively impact the sales moving forward. But I'm going to leave it right there, guys. Let me know what you think about all this, and I will catch you guys on the next one. All right, and if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching the video. Thank you for being here. I do have 2 channels, Minimal Effort Podcast, as well as my gaming channel. I do have a Twitch and Kick for my gaming channel. We do live streams over there occasionally, maybe once a week. And then if you are in the market for a new PC, make sure to check out Meta PCs. Click the link I have down below. Use code TBO at checkout for a special discount. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.